Hello and welcome to the January 13th edition of the Gold, Goats, and Guns Market Report. My name's Tom Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about. So, seriously, let's just get right to it. I did actually finally get some sleep. The baby goats are sleeping through the night. It's good. It's all good. All right. Let's talk about the trifecta of suck. I wrote an article on Friday. I think it just got published by Zero Hedge this morning about what's happening as we approach Davos, the annual World Economic Forum at Davos. And you know that I like to call the people who think they run the world the Davos crowd. Well, neither Trump nor Emmanuel Macron are going to attend Davos. But somehow Macron has enough time to make a pact with Merkel of Germany to begin the defense and economic integration of the two countries. Meanwhile, France is on fire, and protests in Germany are not being reported, and political opposition to Merkel are being beaten in the streets, but we're just going to blithely go along. It's like it's like these people. Jonas Varoufakis called it the Swedish national anthem thing. It was like you go up and you talk to these people and you make your arguments to them. Doesn't matter what it is. Restructure our debt, Brexit. Anything, right? Doesn't matter what it is. And they just kind of look at you and they go, and they nod, and then they go on with their business as if you just sung the Swedish national anthem. Because they're actually completely uninterested in what you have to say, and they believe in their power so thoroughly and they believe in the legal grinding away of the bureaucracy that they can just get away with whatever they want, and it doesn't, and no matter what happens, nothing changes because they have everything under control. That is until, of course, the police turn around and the national military turn around and say, "Oh no, we're done with this," and that's why they're moving towards. Merkel's out there saying, as a lame duck, this is a woman who's going to, who 40% of Germans want her to step down immediately, right? Says, oh no, we can't get enough people to volunteer for the German army now. Or German military forces or security forces. We're going to, we need to hire foreigners. And that would be a good thing for European integration. As German nationalism rises, out of the depths of hell, honestly. Germans are getting back to the point where they're not abjectly ashamed of being German. And that is now akin to being a Nazi. That's how far the pendulum has swung the other direction. And the trifecta of suck for these people is the three following things. The Yellow Vest movement in France. Brexit negotiations, which the British deep state is going absolutely bonkers. Brexit is doing to the British deep state what Donald Trump is doing to the American deep states, outing them in every way, in a way that they never have before. They've always hid behind the media. Now they're actually having to do things politically and do things above board that they've never had to do before. That's a good thing, by the way. It shows the absolute and abject desperation on their parts to maintain the status quo. But, so those are the first two things, right? And we'll get into, Alexander McCourse over at the Duran, had a great video with the other Alex, Cristoforo, the other day, explaining what John Bercow, the Speaker of Parliament, did to try and stop Brexit. Okay. Stop a no-deal Brexit at this point. Even though it's pretty obvious at this point that as much as Jeremy Corbyn and Theresa May will both state that they don't want a no-deal Brexit, they don't really have very many options other than that at this point. Because they've really got, 7 weeks? To cobble something together, unless they already have 3 or 4 different deals already waiting in the wings, but Brussels isn't negotiating. They're, the Brits are just twisting in the wind, singing the Swedish national anthem, and Brussels is blithely going about their business, just drinking Chablis and watching everything burn. Now, watching the traffic splash by. It's just, every time I think about it, I can think of this one particular great Leo Kottke song that it just always pops into my head. I'm sorry. It's just it's a terrible thing being me. The number of synaptic firings, the random synaptic firings that happen to my brain sometimes, really quite interesting. But so you've got the trifecta of suck. So the first two, Yellow vest, Brexit. And the third one is the European parliamentary elections in May, which Matteo Salvini et al., now you can add Sebastian Kurz and Viktor Orban and Marine Le Pen and the rest of them, and AfD in Germany, are targeting as a means by which to overthrow the European technocracy. I don't know that I wish them luck. I don't know that it's going to work for them, but all of that feeds into the growing instability in financial markets. And when we see the kind of volatility that we're seeing here across all asset classes, it's a harbinger of a system on the verge of a breakdown. And any one of these things getting further out of control could seriously destabilize financial markets, regardless of how much liquidity the central banks pump or don't pump into the system. And the central banks are actually helping this along by keeping liquidity tight at a certain level, or at least saying that they're going to keep liquidity tight. When the truth of the matter is as Jeff Snyder over at Alhambra Partners keeps pointing out, there's no money in monetary policy. And the euro-dollar markets are broken, and so there's no liquidity. And so at some point, all of this has to let loose. The problem is no one is really sure as to where to put the money at this point, because the United States looks just as dysfunctional as Europe does, which, by the way, is on purpose, in order to keep everybody confused. Meanwhile, money leaks away towards China and Russia and some other places around the world. But the truth of the matter is, money is confused right now. It does not know where to put it to protect it. So that's why gold is stuck. That's why John Bercow feels that he has the political authority or political capital to pull what he did in trying to force the Parliament to pass some form of Brexit deal that is effectively remain, or cancel Article 50, which I don't think they have in their power to do anyway. It doesn't matter. Take an act of parliament, which they can't do, but they're willing to literally throw out the rulebook and move towards a constitutional crisis in the UK in order to stop Brexit. That's where we are. Which is why, when you think about it, that was always their end game in the first place. So that's why, May goes over there with her negotiators and sits down with Juncker and Merkel and the rest of them, and they just ignore her. Because they've already decided on what the final outcome would be, and they already had their roadmap, and they already think they know how this is going to end. And the thing about it is that even if they betray Brexit now, it doesn't matter. Because do you really think that the Brits aren't going to revolt against the European Union 3 or 4 years later? It's not like the European Union has an army at this point. Well, they think they have an army, but they're not going to be able to build one unless the United States builds it for them. So obviously the situation here is that they're going to betray Brexit. They're going to replace national armies with NATO. Trump is actually helping them do this, and they'll just get rid of Trump, and we'll move on with the great plan for global integration under the globalist rule. That's their plan. I don't think it's going to work, but that's their plan, because at some point the people will say no to all this, and they are saying no in ways that there are fewer of them than there are of us. And at the end of the day, what are you going to do? Burn it all down so that there's no one left? So you can be king of the ant pile? Because that's where this ends. I'm going to talk about Pretium when we get to the charts, because there's some interesting stuff happening with Pretium. Pretium is one of the stocks we have in the Gold, Goats, and Guns portfolio. There was some hoo-ha in the trading this week, and I was asked by one of our subscribers to cover it. I did so in an email, but I want to cover it in a little bit more depth to give people, to remind people what's going on. I'll have some more verbiage on this in February's newsletter as well, just to give you all a heads up on this. I've been following the story for 5-6 years now. This is nothing new. It's actually interesting that Pretium's fighting back. And so the last thing to talk about is, of course, that gold is going nowhere because, again, capital is stuck and doesn't know what to do. So gold made its first attempt at 1,300 last week. And this week we saw a very, very shallow trading range, a very almost uninteresting week in gold. The range was what? $10? $12.91 on the upside, $12.80 on the downside, plus or minus 50 cents. So it's really like less than $11. crazy. The normal range is $30. So we had a 3 sigma event to the lack of volatility side, right? A 3 or 4 sigma event to the lack of volatility. So usually these kinds of weeks after big moves like this are harbingers that we're going to get a correction. Here are your pot odds for the week of, and those numbers are backwards, actually. The high probability and low probability break. I apologize. There is a high probability break of a 95% chance of a high break and a low probability and 70% to the downside. So these numbers are backwards. The reversal percentage is if gold closes below that level, which is the low from 2 weeks ago. Technically, any close here would be a reversal signal, but I would, given the lack of volatility in this bar, I would start here as the last real up move. And I would think of this area in here as your first area of resistance if these two numbers do break down. Those are your actionable levels. The lows from the past 2 weeks and the low from the week previous, or these highs in here. So right around the 1255 to 1250 to 1255 areas where you see support come in. You got resistance here, you got support here, here, all of these highs here. And there's a cluster of them, and that would be your support. So I can see a move back down into the 1250s before attempting another move to 1300. And that would actually possibly be, if you're an Elliott wave guy, which I'm not, another move towards 1300. Of course, we could have a replay of last year where we got another double top in this range, and then it collapses again on liquidity issues coming into Q2, Q3. Those are really the two major dominant chart patterns. The third one would be that we just trade sideways for a little while here, no breakdown. That would be very bullish, and then blast off towards the post-Brexit high, which, again, if any of the trifecta of suck become the trifecta of reality, or instance of reality, then 1365 in gold, 1375 in gold is a given, I think. Then the bigger question is, can it actually break through that on a technically significant basis? Weekly close, first a daily close, and a weekly close, and a monthly close above that level, which would signal a new gold bull market, especially after the monthly close above 1375, I would think is absolutely a time when you can double down or triple down or even quadruple down in gold. So that's where we are now. All right, so let's look at the euro, because on Wednesday we talked about this. The euro was rallying and it was pushing up towards $1.15.5, which was the line in the sand from most of last year. Right, this is the support level that they kept trying to support and defend on the euro, $1.15.5. We got one break in the summer of last year, which was quickly reversed, but then of course couldn't break through $1.18, and so we collapsed down again to a slightly lower low at nearly $1.12. And now we've just been kind of trying to carve out a bottom here as everybody talks dovishly about, or hawkishly about, how they're going to defend the euro and NQE and all this stuff that they can't actually do. We got a break higher on some news earlier in the week that was dollar negative, as it were. And the euro pushed towards that $1.15 zone, and it was completely rejected on Friday. No one wanted to go into the weekend long the euro. Shorts piled on Friday afternoon, pushed it back down into this consolidation. This is really a consolidation area now. This is, I could easily draw a box around this, minus this little low here, and $1.14.7 to around $1.13. It's in a very, very tight band, and they're trying to create the illusion of stability with this stuff in order to make the euro look better than it is. But the truth of the matter is that markets that can't move eventually will. So again, guys like Juncker and Draghi and people like Merkel and Macron, they think they have control, and they think everything is under their control, but it really isn't. And I'm going to skip the Pretium chart for just a second because I want to show you another thing that's going on here. Assets are beginning to correlate around, when you see correlation of assets in a technical sense like this, and this is the Dow Jones Industrial Average and Brent crude, which is the international standard for oil. What you're seeing is one dominant narrative emerging, and the market becomes very binary in its thinking. We lived in a risk-off, risk-on binary world for a long time, and that's kind of broken down over the last 3 or 4 years. And now we're getting back into that same kind of thing. Now everybody is handicapping a global recession. So we had a massive, I wouldn't say massive, we had a good, healthy about 20% correction in the Dow. We had a 40% correction in oil. And now after the bounce, after the bottom and the subsequent 3-week bounce, notice how they can't rally past their first attempt. They can't rally past the breakdown point. And they rallied to that level, both of them, and then stopped. Meaning the market is in the hands of momentum traders at this point. It's not in the hands of investors. Price levels are being determined by people who are trading on a purely technical basis. There is no fundamentals here right now. And so I expect to see this. I expect to see a sell the rally mentality in everything. We saw a sell the rally mentality in the euro, in gold. Less so than we saw here in oil and the Dow Jones. That's the kind of thing you should be looking at. Because look at oil. Oil tried to break above this and failed. The Dow didn't even challenge it. Now it closed strong, so we'll see what happens this week. And yeah, even if it breaks through this week, this commentary loses validity. But notice it was done on, this is a low volume pump, right? This isn't even good volume historically speaking. So just something to really consider. All right. So let's get back to Pretium. Let's talk about Pretium. So Pretium, for those of you who don't know, Pretium Resources is now an intermediate level gold producer that I've been following since it was an early exploration company, or at least a late stage exploration company. They've gone through and built a $600 million or say $700 million mine up in British Columbia. They have very high grade, but it's a very difficult project to mine. There was a lot of controversy over the quality of the deposit and the economic viability of the deposit back during the time when the company needed to move out of exploration and started securing financing. And there's a lot of rules about, they have to issue a 43-101 report, then they have to issue a primary economic assessment, and this and that. There's all these terms and acronyms and whatnot in the industry. And Pretium's stock price refuses to go anywhere relative to its valuation because there are still people in the gold industry that think Pretium is a scam, or at the very least can continue to pound this point home publicly in the press in order to bomb the stock price. They are still angry about the company making the mine because they bet heavily that the deposit was non-economic, that they'd never be able to mine it successfully, and that Pretium's management has been nothing but a bunch of fraudulent dickheads, for lack of a better term. It's a narrative, and it's a narrative they won't let go of. And it's a narrative that has seen suit and countersuit and suit and countersuit for years. Every time Pretium misses a production target by a couple of points, or then the class action lawsuits against their management start. They're fraudulent. They always go back to the Strathcona engineering report, which said that which is an engineering firm that that rejected that the deposit was economic. They did an economic assessment and said there was no economic deposit here, and Pretium's ownership and the CEO at the time, Bob Quartermain, had to spend his own money doing a bulk sample of the thing, and they had gotten two companies to do this. One said it wasn't economic. The other one said it's a 14 gram per ton grade. Now, 14 grams per ton in gold is a blowout. It's the kind of thing that when the gold bull market starts again, Pretium is going to make money hand over fist. The stock will see zeros after its stock price. It will move that high. Okay? Because right now it's profitable at these prices, and sincerely profitable at these prices. At multiples of these prices, the stock is a 10-bagger. Okay? So this has been going on for years. It's nothing new. Every 6 or 7 months or so, when there's maybe when there's there's some Tweety birds, within the company feeding the shorts certainly on Seeking Alpha. You'll see these guys are everywhere. They'll come out and they'll write an article right before earnings or right after earnings or right after some assessment in order to try and bomb the stock. And then the stock will get bombed, just like it did on Wednesday through Friday. The stock got bombed for almost $2 a share over 3 days because they were going to miss their production target by 4%, which they were at the low end of their guidance. And that was considered a miss. It was written up in the markets like it was the worst thing in the world. And the shorts piled on. I read an article this morning where someone was saying that there's been a whole bunch of insider selling, which I went and looked on Yahoo this morning and couldn't find any of that. So there's a lot of this going on. And Pretium on Friday finally struck back for the first time in 6 years and filed a countersuit against people who are trying to manipulate the stock price. This is a very high-profile gold project. This was a project that no one in the industry, except the people who were invested in it, wanted to see come to fruition because of the damage it did within the industry, because Bob Quartermain proved Strathcona wrong. And Strathcona is a very big engineering firm. Does a lot of work for a lot of mining companies. And they rankled a lot of people over this. And I'm sure that that's part of what's going on here. Nothing has changed. Pretium is still producing. It is producing at, even if it doesn't produce at economic rate, at the assessed grade, 14.5 grams per ton, whatever it is. I think it's 14.5. It's some stupendously high number. Even if they only produce at 12 grams per ton. It's still a fabulously profitable mine. They have not in any way reneged on their fiduciary responsibility to their investors. They're actually ramping up production. That has been sold. That has been spun as, well, they can't make grades, so that they can't make grade top grading, so they're gonna have to make it up in bulk and blah 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 blah. And I've heard all this stuff before, and nothing has changed. Okay. Truth of the matter is that it's always been, from the moment this thing started. Where I've talked to some of the most powerful people in the industry. I've talked to geologists. I've talked to investors who have made billions of dollars in gold. I know many of the people in this industry, and they all say the same thing. This is a very difficult deposit to mine. It's going to be very hard for them to mine. They're going to have good quarters and bad. But if anybody can figure out how to get this done, it'll be Bob Quartermain and his staff, and that'll be that. And now Bob is now no longer CEO. Joseph Ovsenek is, and he's in charge of operations. Quartermain's more of a money guy and a development guy, not an operations guy. So he's moved out of the scene, and rightly so. It's time for him to move on. He's also 75 years old, isn't he? He's at the end of his career. This is the last project that he's ever going to work on. And this is a man who's brought 3 major silver and gold mines into production over the course of his career. Quite a legend in the field. So Pretium's got the right people. They got the right location. They've got the right deposit, and there's nothing to worry about here. As long as the stock does not drop below any of the obvious points here, or even here, it could drop as low as $6. And I would say well, why wouldn't you buy it? But let's see what happens. They're going to continue to try and push this thing down because they can. And they're going to use weakness in the gold market to do so. And it's good that Pretium finally issued a countersuit to try and figure out what the hell is going on inside within the company's trading, what's happening in the pits on the Toronto Stock Exchange and on the New York Stock Exchange. The last thing to remember is that they just bought back an 8% stream against future production this year for $237 million. Okay. They could have put it off to next year. If the insiders were truly selling, they could have just put it off and, bled the company out and defrauded investors. No, they bought it back this year, which is when they could have brought it. They could have bought it back this year for $237, next year for $275, or never. They could have never bought the stream off, and the stock would have never been profitable, and they could have sold out into rallies, and that would be a real sign that the company is a scam. That's not what happened. So this is one of the ugly faces of this industry, and just in general, of the financial industry in general. There are people out there who will do anything to make a dollar, including trash the reputations and the ability of investors to make any money. They just chop 15% off of your or 18% off of the value of your stock. Now, if you've got cash to deploy, I would buy here. I am. Flat out. Pretium at $7 is a steal. So we've already got 2 tranches of it in the newsletter. I'm not going to buy another tranche of it. There's no reason. All right. So that's the situation. I hope you, frankly, this is what I have for this week. But this will give you an idea of exactly the kind of thing. And that's the theme for today. Evil people don't give up until they're either jailed or shot. I think that's the best way to describe what's happening in the world today. All right, you guys take care. You have a great Sunday afternoon. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.